Hi, I'm Ruth Exley. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and today on Mental Help Desk, we'll be taking a look at the child's brain after going through a traumatic experience and the potential for the child's recovery from post-traumatic stress disorder. So neuroscience tells us that a child's brain functioning and development depend highly on social experiences, which are actually more powerful than genetics in shaping the brain. Early life experiences play a central role in training the brain to respond well to stress. So the child's brain is so socially and environmentally attuned during their earliest years that the brain shows incredible plasticity and capacity for growth. Early experiences can actually set the stage for a child's emotional and behavioral stability. So how does the child's brain respond to traumatic stress? Well, stress is essentially a normal reaction to feeling overwhelmed or in danger. The brain releases stress hormones which signal our fight or flight response, and next the heart speeds up, breathing gets faster, and senses are heightened. Normally, the brain naturally copes and can return itself to its natural state of equilibrium, but during a traumatic stress, a child may feel intense fear or even terror. So the brain is so overwhelmed with sensory input, and certain parts of the brain that naturally are able to usually regulate emotions become handicapped or blocked, and as a result, the child's motor output can decline, communication becomes difficult, their thinking is slowed. Some kids even experience a loss of memory or blackouts. So with all of their senses in overdrive, their neural pathways become dysregulated, and a child experiences a state of what we think of as crisis. After the traumatic event, naturally children come across reminders of trauma in their environment, such as the sound or smell or TV or movies that depict the trauma, and before they're aware of it, the child becomes flooded again by physiological stress response. So children who come across lots of trauma stimuli often feel that their trauma is all-consuming, or they feel trapped in their trauma story. And many times the only coping skill a child can turn to is extreme avoidance, or just not even wanting to talk about the trauma in hopes that they'll just limit themselves from being reminded. Many kids just try to forget that it ever happened. Unfortunately, trauma can have damaging effects on the brain and impact long-term development into adulthood. The right brain is especially sensitive to trauma, which is known to control relational attachment, emotional regulation, and mood. Studies sadly show that children who have been traumatized once are at risk for becoming traumatized again in the future. So the good news in all of this is that the brain remains flexible throughout life and has the capacity to change. So as the brain matures, it continues to produce new neural pathways while old neural pathways die. And even though the traumatic experience will always be a part of the child's life, with the help of trauma-focused therapy and strong attachment figures, children can gradually learn to tolerate difficult feelings and sensations in their bodies by becoming gradually exposed to their traumatic memories while practicing relaxation skills that they've learned, and then they also practice new ways to think and learn and talk about the trauma and treatment. This is typical an approach called trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. And oftentimes we piece together a new narrative in therapy that's not so difficult to remember. In my practice, I primarily see children who have been through one or several traumas, and I am continuously amazed at the resiliency of children and their courage to open up about what scares them the most. I am really pleased to see that many kids experience full recovery from PTSD. I do want to thank the Portland Therapy Center for having me on Mental Help Desk, and also remind you that working through trauma is possible for every child, and it's never ever too late to get started.